Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you see a little link down below, you can actually click on that. You'll end up being able to register for Zoom. And inside of Zoom, you'll see a chat. Inside of that chat, you'll see another link. And then you click on that, and you'll end up in Mukana. And that's where you actually become one of the producers. So you're actually choosing what we talk about. Your questions and your votes really drive the whole conversation here. So definitely try to make your way through that route so that you can, if you have questions, driving questions that you need to ask. If the first hour is all opened to whatever you're interested in. Second hour is dedicated to something we want to spend a little more time on. Now, Saturdays right now have been a little different, where we have 2 hours of Q&A and then 2 hours of education. We're going to tuck that back a little bit to where we have 1 hour starting next week because we're making room for more Saturday festivities. So soon we'll be doing some MetaHuman and Unreal in the morning. And then we'll also be doing cooking again with Hasmukh and Damayanti. So we'll be working on that in the next couple of weeks. And so we're kind of prepping our schedule to make that manageable. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Guy, what do we have?
First one's coming in from Adrian Allback in Brisbane, and he asks, ATEM's domination of budget switching solutions is a given. What about the Roland lineup, which seems to have superior audio facilities? Any comments?
Go ahead, Carl.
Their audio in is no different than at the price point. So under $1,000 US, their audio is identical. So it's like 1/8 inch. Once you get up to about 1,500 US, then you get a one mic input. You do actually get one XLR mic input, but essentially it's all unbalanced, either RCA or 8-inch jacks. So I'm pretty sure that internally, maybe the audio pathway may be a bit better because Roland's been doing audio since 1972. So they maybe they have a better purchase on that because they've been doing it for 50 years. But as far as the quality going in, the options to go in, you have to hit about $1,500 before you get one XLR.
Right. Go ahead, Tim. I can't hear you, Tim.
Sorry about that. We have the Roland VR50 HD, but it's like a $7,000 unit. And in that one, it's a pretty good unit because it has a multi-view built in. It has all kinds of inputs and outputs. It has SDI inputs in the back, XLR inputs, 8 channels of audio with faders and stuff like that. So it's pretty capable, and it does scaling pretty well too. So it's nice, but it's pretty expensive for what it's an all-in-one box, and it does work pretty good for us.
I think that Roland, as an all-in-one box that you don't have to have a lot of things cobbled together, has produced a pretty good result. I think that you can definitely, for the same price, have a lot more power using one of the ATEMs as the a 1ME or something like that with an X32 is going to be the same price or less. So I think you can get more functionality for the same price as the Roland, I think is the issue. If you want something all in one, especially if it's mobile and you're moving around, I think at that size, the Roland provides a great value. So I think that it definitely has a place in the market. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in October with Blackmagic has taken over NAB. It's really the Blackmagic show with other special guests, so like Sony. We were talking about this in the pre-show, and it'll be interesting to see what they do in between the constellations and the minis, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that hasn't been updated for years, and I'm going to guess that they're going to update all of those as we go into October. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I've owned that same switcher that Tim talked about, which he nailed it. It's pretty slick just for an all-in-one unit. A lot of rental houses own these just because of the scaling, like you said, and iMag. So there's very little latency to just go right back out to a projector. So if you're shooting musical performance or something. The other nice thing about these devices is the newer ones have auto switching. So you can either do a cadence where it'll just switch every couple seconds. You could have it random, which is really handy if you ever want to walk away. Like I did a 24-hour live stream of the reading of the Mueller report, and I didn't want to be there all 24 hours, so I just set it on auto switch random and walked away and went to bed and let it roll.
It'd be interesting. One of the things that we've done with software, but we haven't done with the ATEM, which I think would be interesting, is using audio to switch, to do auto switching. So basically taking the audio tracks of everyone speaking and just auto switching between them. So like what you see in Zoom when you're in speaker view, you could do that with hardware. It's just, and you'd have a lot of control over it. And that would be, an Arduino problem, so it'd be yeah, go ahead, John.
If I'm understanding correctly, you can actually do that in Mix Effect. There's a video follows audio feature in there. You have some handles, and you can just set it up to cut between cameras and have like a wide shot that it should rest on if people aren't speaking. So you can do that in Mix Effect Pro.
I'll definitely check that out. We'd have to then use the audio inside of the switcher to do that. So which a lot of us don't do. But that's amazing. I didn't know that it was in there. So we'll definitely check it out. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, and he asks, "What does the panel think of the production values seen in the Olympics so far?"
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I've only been watching the OBS stuff. Haven't watched any of the Australian content yet. Not really interested in Australian content.
Can you define OBS for everybody?
So OBS is essentially what OBS is the Olympic Broadcasting Service, and they are the ones who actually control the cameras on the side. They're actually the ones who shoot the actual events. Each nation may send along their own cameras, and they usually do reporting from outside the venue, or they do interviews within the venue to the athletes after they've finished their race, whatever. That's not what I'm not watching that stuff at the moment. I'm just watching the OBS. So OBS is quite professional. The stuff I've watched today, even the stuff that is PTZ, looks really good. It's perfectly exposed, perfectly framed, perfectly timed. So there's very good quality. What I'm actually enjoying is the fact that I'm able to get 45 different streams, and I can just pick whichever one I want, and they're all professional. So that's pretty good.
Now, where are you getting the OBS streams?
So our local provider here is running 2 channels that are curated by Australians, here in Australia and actually in Japan. But the other 43 are just OBS streams, which with the English commentary. So these are bent pipe. So what it is, so OBS is going into, it's a 7 network here in Australia that's doing it. It's going into the 7 networks hub in the International Broadcasting Center in Tokyo, and they're doing a bent pipe straight out to their app.
And can anyone get to those, or do you have to be in Australia to get that?
VPN. So, yeah. VPN, and you will just need an email sign in, or the Apple.
And where do you find that?
It's on everything. So it's on the Apple TV. It's on everything. So literally anything that can be anything. So it's on iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, Android TV.
And what is it called again?
So 7 Plus.
7 Plus. Okay,
7
very
plus.
good.
So if you go to VPN, just come into Australia with 7 Plus, and 45, and it's not country dependent. There are 2 channels that I talked about. They are country dependent. They're Australian based, but all the others are just a bent pipe of that sport. Interesting.
Go ahead, Rupert, and then Sky.
I also followed Roscoe's advice, I think yesterday or the day before. He mentioned that you can get the first 30 days with Sling TV for $10, and that gives you access to the official Olympics channel. So I'm getting my coverage that way.
Go ahead, Sky.
I just spoke into my Comcast remote and said Olympics, and something showed up on my screen. But what I enjoyed was the opening ceremony of all the different teams coming in. Of course, we did have, it obviously was through NBC, so every 5 minutes you had to listen to 5 minutes of somebody sponsoring it, and then they would come back, but they would truncate the people that you missed, because obviously that show continued on, but they figured out how to edit it down. And so, like you said, the EVS operator was very busy.
Yeah.
The playback was pretty phenomenal. They had in-ears on the 2 flag bearers for the American team, and that was pretty impressive that they could talk directly to the people up. I assume they're in the booth, the announcers. And I only saw 1 camera fobble, but they must have a second with the camera person, because there's just a lot of steady cams going on. I saw a pedestal right there on the platform, and again, of course, what is it, 18,000 drones? How many of those drones created the globe outside?
1,500.
It was a lot of drones. It was cool. That's
cool. That's becoming the new thing, is all the drones. Yeah. So I know for me, I haven't watched any of it yet, so I can't comment on the quality. I just know that I went up to Peacock to sign in, or to buy it, but I couldn't buy it through Apple TV. I couldn't just hit subscribe. I had to put in emails, and so I was like, nope. So that's now the hump that I'm not willing to go over, is putting my email in, because I can't manage my subscriptions if I do that. And so So anyway, so I went back to YouTube TV and I said, search for Olympics. And it said, would you like to record all Olympics? And I just went, yes. And so now I assume in my to be recorded in YouTube TV, I have basically all of the things that NBC's doing, at least, that they're going to broadcast. So I don't have open connections to it, but I have that. And what's nice about that is I can record it. I mean, I can actually scrape it to get reference. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments in the public about the sound because there's no audio or no participants there up in the bleachers, but I think it's pretty enjoyable. You can really listen to the players. You can listen to the ambience microphones.
So they're not pumping fake sound in. They're just letting it be quiet.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
yeah,
great.
It's pretty great. Yeah,
I have to admit that I have found when we were watching football, I found that to be super annoying. Like it was just like, because when you know, like they're pumping stuff in, when you know they're pumping it in, it's just super weird, you know. And I just felt that to be completely a put off. You know, I just said, just let it be quiet. You know, that's what I felt. Anyway, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, they said that on the news that basically they didn't go with the pumping because they just couldn't afford it. They had to really cut costs on the Olympics.
Well, I'm glad because I think it'll be great. Now I'm really interested to see now I'm more interested to see the sports because I want to hear, because I think the mics, I think it'll be really interesting to hear what we hear in the process. Go ahead, Carl.
So just a quick note on the sound. People who have finished their events are encouraged to actually go to other events and be the crowd because they're allowed to. So for the athletics, which is the second half Olympics, all the swimmers apparently are going to go to the athletics and the cycling, which happened in the second week. So you'll see all the stands will be all the swimmers from all the countries supporting. So that's what they're asking the athletes to do, is go support your own country because you're the only ones that can.
And I know it's Saturday, so I'll make a little bit of an exception. I think we might have missed Dante Mugisha. If we want to bring him in, Sky, I don't have the host anymore. There we go. We'll let him.
Ken.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Ken. Sorry. Yeah. We'll see if Dante, unless he put his hand. Did he put his hand down, or did we bring him in? All right.
No, I brought him in.
Okay, cool. We'll see where that goes. Next question. Oops, I moved it under you here. Hold on. There you go.
Okay. The infamous C47 clip was discussed recently. I found the term is trademarked and actual clips are manufactured under the name. Does the panel have experiences with these official clips, and are off-brand C47 clips acceptable?
Someone actually copyright that just hasn't been challenged yet. I am fairly certain that there is prior art, for that. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so if you check B&H or C47, they've been there for quite a while. I always found it a bit of a joke for the last 10 years seeing them on B&H. But yeah, in Bunnings, that's the hardware store in Australia where you can buy like literally a bucket of C47s, wooden ones, so you don't get burnt and that stuff. So they actually did name them C47s for a little while, and then they got rid of it. So my guess, it could have been because of this trademark. So if you have a trademark and you fight for it, you can keep it. See, that's the one, the black one there, the current C47.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, so C47s, I think the term has been used as C47 for clothespins as they relate to film, probably since the mid 40s or 50s. I think. I mean, it's been around for a long time, anyway, so it's clothespin. I just think it's hilarious that someone actually trademarked it. Go ahead, TJ.
Why would you use one?
Off-brand are definitely acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's even plastic ones, but the wooden ones are better. They hold better. Yeah, you obviously use clothespins for just everything, like just attaching everything to everything. A lot of times when you put filters on, so you put you want to diffuse something, you want to throw something over it, you just use C47s, and oftentimes you see people with strings of them hanging, around their from their belt. Go ahead, TJ.
The other thing you'll see a lot of them used for is when doing photo shoots and fashion. They have an article of clothing that doesn't quite fit right along the back. They'll just put a row of C47s to just kind of tighten everything up to make it sort of fit.
I wanted to welcome Jonty. Jonty, where are you coming in from? Can you hear us? I'm not sure if you can hear us, Jonty. I'm going to guess you're joining us from Rwanda. Can you hear us? Okay, we'll keep going. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Eric Price in Leavenworth, Kansas, and he says, what have the panel members used for a tally light system with their ATEM for multicam productions to help talent orient on the right camera?
Go ahead, Carl.
So Blackmagic actually make one. So a little bit pricey, but it does a lot more than just tally, of course. This can be run by fiber or by HDMI. So it's pretty straightforward how it works. But there are, via HDMI out for the ATEMs and SDI as well, there are off-brand ones that actually do recognize the signal, and will do it as well.
Go ahead, Sky.
I used a rubber chicken because I was standing next to the ATEM switcher and I was physically pointing to the different cameras. It's not as functional, but it was cheap in what we had.
Go ahead, Doug.
So I don't have an ATEM, believe it or not, probably the only one on the panel, but I use a system with my TriCaster called QB, and I just looked and it does work with the Blackmagic gear. It's a wireless system and it's actually pretty functional.
A couple of things. One is that the cameras, a lot of the Blackmagic cameras, so if you're using a ATEM Mini with the 6K or 4K, their lights on the front will actually form a tally. So they'll actually tally for you. If you have the larger monitor on the Ursa, it has a tally built into it. And the ones that we've used most are Skarhoy. So Skarhoy you can basically connect that to, and they have these little lights that can attach to the top of your cameras. And the Skarhoy ones work really well. And that's what Mark's showing there is, and that is what we've probably used the most. Really cost effective and easy to throw together. Next question.
Next one's coming in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he says, I cracked my 10.5-inch iPad Pro in half. I can replace it for $450 from Apple. Is it worth spending $1,300 to update to the new iPad Pro 11 and new pencil? Budget is tight right now and don't want the 13-inch as it's too big. What say the panel?
Carl?
If you can afford to update to the M1, if you still want an iPad Pro.
Yeah. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I have the 11-inch, and I enjoy it. Of course, I'm not. I don't have that high-res screen that the 12.9 has, but it works really well for what I did. And I just hooked up a few things through the USB port to test out the Thunderbolt. Works
And
well.
your video is frozen there, Jeffrey, for some reason. Ken?
Yeah, the internet kind of went on.
Got it. Ken?
Yeah, for the 450 is a good deal, I think. There is a jump, obviously, from the version you've got to the new one, but for 450, I don't know. It is a toss-up for me whether I would, think about spending that much more for the.
I never fix them. I just have to say that I never fix things when they break. I'm like, oh, it's time to upgrade, because I don't want to spend $450 on something in the past, So I always just figure I'm going to save up for the next thing. And I will say that I have the M1 iPad, and it's the best computing machine I've ever owned. Like the 12.9. It is snappy. Everything works really well. The screen is unbelievable. But it's not the most powerful thing I've ever owned, but it is the most pleasurable to use. It's just everything about it is, they've really hit a home run with that one. Go ahead, Rupert.
This is why I just put all my mobile devices in OtterBox Defender cases. Every time I drop it, it saves it, and I just paid for itself over and over.
I have it in I did get the keyboard as well. So I have, it feels like a tank, the keyboard that comes with that you can get with the iPad. Protects it. I've dropped it a few times, but it also just is like a tank around it, and it feels like a laptop. Like I needed to get something remotely, and I asked my wife to grab the laptop, and she didn't know which one. She's like, which is the laptop, because it's the same size. Next question. Oh, can't hear you, Guy.
Next one's coming in from John Barker here on the panel, and he's from Sweden. Richard Lavery gave a great insight into his setup yesterday on After Hours. Can you explain his setup and how the event went?
Thanks, John, for throwing the ball at me. We were just doing a gig with a local group called Kyoto Love Hotel, And because we're at a stage where I'm trying to let our team do things without me troubleshooting with them, I stepped back. So I was able to be in after hours with the multi-view and kind of just pipe some of the music into the after hours show when people wanted to listen to it and see what was going on. And we were just kind of chatting about it. So it was a fun day whilst I was trying to run the comments that were going to the band on stage at the same time. So every so often someone would ask me and I'm still typing something at the same time going into the studio. So I shouldn't have been so distracted, but it was fun. It was great. I was also kind of testing our internet to see whether we could handle the mainstream going out plus Zoom calls going in and out of the building in different ways and different places at the same time. So it was a fun evening.
And I think we're going to hopefully do a little bit more there as far as figuring out remote production with Richard. So stay tuned for that. I think we're going to have some fun there. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Michael, no last name, in Silverado, California. And he says, curious, could Alex share the specs of the 4 Mac Minis he recently purchased?
I'll even share you the spec with all 5 of them. The ones that I got were the very base model, 250 gigs of RAM, of hard drive space with 8 gigs of RAM. For what I'm using them for, they're just purring along. So this is all they're there to do is do 4 SDI outputs from, via the deck link cards in a Sonnet box to go out to the router and then the switcher, and they're barely moving the needle to do that. So at the very base model, I didn't see any reason to spend more money on them. I tend to use Mac Minis as kind of glue. I don't really push them very hard, so I don't have the need for the more powerful, more RAM and more power than that the other ones have, just because it's not how I use them. I probably should try the more powerful ones, but I haven't bothered. And they're working great. Yeah, so they're all set up, and you'll see more of that as we continue to do testing. But right now we have 20 outputs coming out. We're able to pull up to 20 outputs out of Zoom into the switcher and router. And then what we have is, and we've talked about it a little bit last week, but Andy Carluccio has written some Zoom. We have Zoom ISO pushing that out, and then Zoom OSC is paying attention. Zoom OSC plus Isadora is paying attention to who the last 16 people were that talked, that then push that into a multi-view, a Blackmagic multi-view, that then goes back into the switch. And so we can kind of rebuild the gallery, a 16 by gallery, or 4x4 gallery from everyone talking. And that's the first step to solving the gallery problem, is the first step to us building an entire switching process around that. And what we're really working on there is basically making the cutting of the show, playback, everything else to be a much more creative process and less technical process. So our goal is to get to a point where you just pull up an iPad, log in to most likely a virtual server, and then run the show. And that show will be, you can run it on, it'll be very visual, and so that anybody can learn how to cut a show relatively easily. It's more about knowing how to do the show, not how to run a switcher or how to use the software. We abstract all of that. We're working on abstracting all of that away from the user. And so it's early days, but I think that by September you'll get to see what we're doing, and it'll allow us to scale and do things like, we could just set it to auto switch for a little while, and it'll just start switching based on who's talking, and it knows who you are because of Zoom OSC. So when I say hit lower third, I don't have to say bring up Sky's lower third. Sky's lower third is in the system, and so when you say lower third, that person who's full screen, it will just put the lower third over. It'll put the correct lower third. Theoretically, it probably won't at first. It'll probably put some random version of it up there. But the idea is that you'll just be able to sit there and do all those things without having to pull up graphics. The graphics will be contextual based on what's happening. And so those are the kind of things that we're working on. So anyway, that's what I took that question a little further, but that's what we're working on there. That's why I bought all those Mac Minis. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Leo Mindell in Pinner, UK, and he says, I did an event with Matt Mullenweg. His picture kept going soft only around his mouth. What was causing it? And he's got a YouTube link here to check out.
Go ahead, Carl.
So it's a blur my background feature. So I took a little look at your video. It's kicking in every once in a while. So it's some of them are a little bit better than others. Like I'll switch mine on now so you can actually see the effect, and I can make it affect me. So Let's take a look. Background filters, blur my background. There we go. So if I move my head, it's not perfect. So
somewhere we're getting a lot of noise. I'm not sure exactly. Is that coming?
It is hailing right now.
Oh, got it. It just suddenly started, and wow, is it loud?
So so if I move my hand in front, so you'll see my hand's not going to be perfect, and that's what was happening with his goat. He had a goatee. I think the goatee was confusing it, and the hats in the background he had. So I think that's what's confusing it.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Rupert. That was amazing. I was like, what just happened? Yeah.
The jet engine.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if the question meant that it was just on the YouTube feed, on the YouTube recording. I was going to actually ask, just here recently, the last few days, when rewatching Office Hours on YouTube, I thought I saw some like auto sharpening going on around some edges. I don't know whether that's just a recent thing or what's going on there.
There's I don't think it's auto sharpening in the software, but some people's cameras are sharpening. Go ahead, Leo.
So this wasn't actually on Zoom. This was in StreamYard that we did the event. Hence you can see the other things around.
Right.
So we did this in StreamYard. So it was only happening on him. And I don't know if any of you will remember that Matt actually came out with a blog post in 2019 that he got mixed reception when he said people shouldn't be using webcams as CEOs of top technology companies. And if anybody doesn't know who Matt Mullenweg is, he's the head of Automatic, which is WordPress. And he said he was just basically saying it's time that C-suite woke up and started using decent quality equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So typically he is known to be good to see. But in this case, it didn't play off.
And was he using the soften background mode? I can't see from the still.
If I just press play and carry on, you'll see you keep seeing it just keeps on appearing and disappearing on him.
Yeah, so his hair and his goatee.
Right. I mean, because there's a couple things that could go on there. Is that if he's sometimes that kind of thing will happen also with if the temporal compression is overloaded. So it doesn't have to be, if it's a softened background, that's definitely the problem in this case. But the other thing that can happen is that if you have a busy background, he doesn't have his background is not overly busy, but if you have a busy background, you can overload what's available, and the compression can basically push it down because it doesn't look. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
When you see it, you'll see it, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, just watching full screen, his shirt and everything is blurring out as well.
It's blurred background.
Sure.
Yeah, it's got blurred
and his
background.
edges.
It's just,
his edges around his ears.
Yeah, it's probably interesting. It's a interesting.
It's a different algorithm to Zoom's.
It continues to underline our thing of not only should you not use webcams, you should not use blur background, especially in a public event. All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Richard Lavery in Belfast, UK, and he says, "Can Leo Mindell give us details on how his event went yesterday?"
Well, that's part of it. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, so it went incredibly well. Just a quick recap. We ran a 24-hour event. It was all in StreamYard to deliver the front end of it. In the back end, all the play out and all the recordings were all controlled by vMix. So we always put the recordings on a vMix box on AWS because then we've got zero issue about internet connectivity, and we're using the lists in there. So we've got all the advertising loaded up in lists in there, so we can shuffle the adverts and play them in between. But the key bit that we always do is we use a long stinger. That's the key bit that I always use. So I use something that's around about 15 seconds rather than say 4. So that when I press that stinger, I'm able to shuffle who's on the screen, including the play out machine, put it back on again, and the end of the stinger and the first frame of the slate on the end of the stinger and the slate on the end of the first are identical, so that the two things match up. And people don't know, apart from us who are watching, because you can see a little bar in the bottom left to know which one we're on or not. The rest of the world don't see that or don't understand that. And it worked really, really well. And what was brilliant is I had, I think, 7 people from Office Hours joined the production team and added in a wealth of experience. The bit I just wanted to pass on that's will be useful, I think, to people. We kept having an issue that the vMix machine sound kept ducking, and we were pulling our hair out because we were having to shift it up. We were lifting up the vMix play out. It turns out that when you team viewer onto a machine, Windows sees that machine as a video, as a voice call, and it enables that duck the audio on the machine by 20 or 8 or 50% because it thinks it's in a voice thing. And it was driving us out the wall. Because we'd literally gone through over and over again and couldn't find it, and then we found it right at the end.
That's frustrating. That's frustrating. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri, and he says, any recommendations for a free Windows-based decibel meter? Search results seem to scream, hey buddy, want some malware?
Free, is it? Yeah, free Windows. Free is usually malware. that's how I kind of approach things. Go ahead, Chad, and then TJ.
I have used Uline.
Oh, Uline is the exception. Yep.
Thank you. And it's been great for me. The only problem is if you are using vMix and you want to use this, you'll want to disable graph saving, because in vMix, while it's saving graphs, it can introduce audio artifacts.
There you go. Yeah, Uline is a great example of what, but you do have to be very careful. I view almost all software that's free unless I understand the angle, unless there's an upgrade path somewhere. I won't buy anything standalone that's free, or I won't download anything unless I see that they're trying to upsell me to something else is the only time I think that that's okay at this point. Next question.
Next one comes in from me, and I ask, what did I miss in After Hours?
We went straight through again. so Carmi and Leo and a couple other folks kept it open, and I think that we're continuing to experiment with the After Hours becoming 23 hours, which is or 22 hour or 21 hours before the pre-show here. Go ahead, Leo.
The only thing I can add is that we started talking about a really, really important subject, so much that we decided it had to be a second hour subject, which was clothing and blacks and where you buy them, and whether we want branded trousers that have the After Hours logo on them. We felt that is what we all
I can say is
need.
Black on black. That's how I do it. I like to do my shirts is black on black. So we'll work on that. I mean, that just means the black logo on top of a black shirt. That's
exactly what I want. But because some people supply shirts to you, we thought that if the trousers though had the had the office hours logo on them, black on black, then we can get away with it.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to work on that. Once we get going and once we settle, the logo is coming along quite nicely. It's a better logo to put on because it doesn't have text on it anymore. And it'll sew in well. You'll find that I wear a lot of on this show I don't, but I wear a lot of baseball hats, and so generally the rule of logos is it must look good on a baseball hat. if I can't imagine on a baseball hat, not a good logo. And so I think that we'll definitely do that. One of the things we did for Pixel Core, there's two things that we did for Pixel Core that were interesting. One is that we had, when you volunteered for a show, we would print shirts and they would say San Francisco on them. They would have Pixel Core staff, and then it would have big staff on the back of it if you were shooting, but then it had San Francisco and it had London and it had wherever we were. And we found that was a strong draw. A lot of people wanted they're like, you couldn't do it. It got to a point where we couldn't do a show if we weren't going to give away the shirts. If the shirts were part of the thing, I realized people were collecting the shirts. And then the other thing we started doing was, of course, patches. So we'll talk about that in the future. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one of the cool things about the After Hours show is sometimes people will be on location at a gig, and if you ask them, they'll say, "Hey, here's what this is." So yesterday, what I did catch was Jeff Keithley came in, and he was in his Tesla. So I said, "Hey, Jeff, can you show us what you got there?" Yeah. And he popped open the gull wing door, walked behind him into the back seat. He had a full-on switcher setup running Livestream Studio. he had a couple courts for tennis set up, and then he went into the back seat, the trunk, and he had back there one of the big, huge Mark Roberts cameras. I think it was a Panasonic something, and then went to run around to the frunk, and there was the power distribution in there, which was insane. I mean, he was piped in to like, the big 480 3-phase or whatever it was. It was massive, but it was cool to see him working, working his magic.
I mean, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for after hours, is just that there are things that can be really cool. And again, what we'll do is we'll try to have somebody, whoever's accountable, if they see something, we're gonna have it, in Discord available, so that you can just say, hey, this is happening in after hours, and people can, if people just keep track of it, they can jump in real quick. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, we went on a shopping spree with Hasmuth to his local retail store. He was at pains to point out that he gets all his cameras now from Guy, but everything else that he buys in this store, and basically, you can see they all line up because Hasmuth probably keeps them all in business.
He's the whale.
He's the whale, and they literally are lining up to give him everything he ever needs as he walked into that store. So that was quite good. And I went to the biggest revenue generating Costco in the world and walked around. That's where we came up with the discussion about blacks, because I was looking at their different lines.
I think that's a good discussion. It's also a good example of a good discussion that's good for after hours. Maybe a second hour, and then I think we'll find things in after hours that we should do a second hour about that. But I think dress on at someone should put it into the second hour suggestions. But dress at events, I think, is a useful conversation. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Sky Gleason in Seattle, and he says, 1 week from today, Saturday, July 31st, the Pacific Northwest chapter of Office Hours is invited to an in-person gathering between 1 to 4 p.m. How would we connect the rest of the Office Hours community? A hybrid barbecue?
Go ahead, Liam.
Just send us the tickets, and we'll attend.
Yeah, it would be fun to. I think that having a window there that people can walk over and say hi, like with a wide shot or something like that. And I think that's a good after hours, thing to do, is just to have it, just have a window over there and someone can walk over and talk to everyone. One thing that we have done at events, we did it at a wedding, and then we've done it at a couple other events, is a wireless, setup where you can walk around and say hi to everybody. So that might be, like a wireless camera. And what we did is we did 2 wireless systems, one to the monitor and a little speaker, and the other one back to the computer. And then you could just move it around and set it down wirelessly, and it would, and you could be part, you could move someone around and be part of the thing. Go ahead, Rupert.
Alex, can we hook up your remote control flamethrower to under the barbecue grill?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Well, we are expecting Mark is bringing his family down. They're going to go out on the lake, and then somebody, Ken, I think from downtown Seattle, is going to bring a lot of beans. So we're going to have a good, fun family, and
definitely include us. Yeah, throw at least a laptop up or an iPhone or something like that, and let us see how it goes.
Done.
Sounds great.
Done and done.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from John Barker in Malmö, Sweden, and he says, can Alex walk us through creating a USDZ from a real-life object? I have the iPad Pro and a Mac, just trying to remember the apps involved in the creation process.
So a lot of it's going to change. I can't walk through it. Let's see if I can do this easily. Hold on. Let's see. Let's go to the next question. Let me see if I can pull that up. So just save that question and go to the next one.
Okay, next one. Let's see if I hit answer, though. It's going to kick that one.
Just hit cancel.
Oh, cancel. Okay. Next one's coming in from Mark Bridges in Covina, and he says, this may be an old school question, but what's the best way to get PA audio into multiple medium-sized conference rooms? No Dante infrastructure to tap into, no line of sight, 4 rooms across the hall from each other, can't run cable across the hall, only have line of sight.
Go ahead, Carl.
So the best option is an old option. So that would be the Airport Express. It has audio out. You will need a Mac to control it. But you can send audio to multiple at once, or you can send different audio to different ones. You just name them differently, of course. They're secondhand now, but they're about $129, $100. You'll find a lot of them. A lot of them will be on sale because they use the older Wi-Fi spec. There is a solution from Behringer. Yeah, so Ken John's got one. I've got one as well. But they're excellent because Apple put an audio jack at the back, and you can actually stream audio. Essentially, it's a precursor to AirPlay. So essentially it's AirPlay audio only. But this will go through walls, not a problem. You don't even need line of sight for this. It's very strong because this is all plastic, so there's no metal. But this would be the best solution at the best price and the most flexible solution. It does require a computer in the mix, though, a Mac in the mix, to stream the audio to.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Low power FM transmitter and 4 radios, receivers.
Possibly. might not always come through, but possibly. Go ahead, Craig. I can't hear you, Craig.
Sorry, I thought I'd done that. Yeah, I was going to say essentially the same thing, just using like a Sennheiser wireless in-ear pack. Broadcast out on one frequency, get one pack for each room. You can even get the wired battery replacement for it, so that you don't have to worry about the receiver being on batteries.
So let's go ahead and back up to that question here. So there's two apps that I think that you probably want to pay attention to, and one is easier to see, and the other one I'll just tell you about because I don't have it set up for it. So the one that you want to take a look at for objects is Clone with a Q, Qlone. The other one that you can play with that I can show you is this is let's see if I turn it here. Oh, I guess not. So anyway, what you're seeing here, this is Polycam, and you'll see it just kind of grabbing onto geometry. And it doesn't work with small objects as well. I mean, you can do it to some degree, and then if I hit record, it's going to start recording those. It's going to start showing you what it's grabbed onto. Small objects is not what Polycam does as well, but if you take it outside, it does a pretty good job. You can see it starting to grab onto that model, but it hasn't worked as well in. If you want to take a rock face, it's amazing, or some object like a room. Polycam I think has worked really well. Q or Clone has a pattern that you print out and you put underneath your object, and it will use it to calibrate, and that'll help you pull that out. All of this stuff is going to change. As the other way to do it is really to watch Apple. What you can do is watch if you're more technically inclined, which I know you are, John. What you want to do is watch Apple's sessions on object capture, because what they have a command line interface that will let you take all the photos along with the depth data and throw them into the command line, and it'll process them for you. And that's the precursor to the apps that people are building right now. So it just shows you what you can get out of it. It's going to be the future because it's doing the thing that I know that at least I've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years, which is that eventually they're going to tie the LiDAR to the photos, and that's what Apple's doing. So they now have an API and they have a library that will do it for you. You don't have to figure out how to merge photogrammetry data and LiDAR data together. Apple will do it for you. Like they've figured it all out. And so what we're going to end up with is a whole bunch of new apps that are coming out in the fall. I think that do this for you. Probably most of them will not be very great, but some of them will. But what they'll do is you put it on a turntable and you just take a bunch of photos, and then you take all those photos or you can walk around a larger object. It doesn't really matter, and you throw those all into the and make those available to the Apple library, and it'll build a USDZ model for you. And the reason that is really interesting for those of you listening is right now, Motion and Final Cut will support those models. So you can literally throw a USDZ model into Motion and rotate it around and animate it and do whatever else you want with it. That's cool. Eventually, we assume you can even text these now. You could take a model right now, and I can text you a USDZ model if you have an iPhone, and literally it'll just pop up in front of you. And if you have a LiDAR, it'll pop up at scale. And so I could send you a USDZ of a chair. You can put it in your house and see how it looks. So those are all things that are coming. A lot of us assume that eventually we're going to see that capability in Keynote, and that's going to change everything. Like Keynote is the one that I'm waiting for, because it means that all our presentations, if you want to rotate that object into just the right thing for your presentation, or if you want to rotate the object while you're talking, all of that's going to be available inside of a presentation tool. But I think that I don't expect to see Keynote until next year. At this point, it could happen as early as this fall, but I think that's more likely next year, because I think what Apple's doing, what we're seeing is the most methodical rollout of AR of any product I've ever seen, which is that they've been slowly handing us all the technologies. This capture technology is a big piece of getting all those apps out, having that readily available, having it all ready to go. And so it's something that we as media producers, I think, should really pay attention to. Like we should be watching this space really closely. We should be practicing in this space. We should be learning the space, because it's going to be explosive in the next year or two. 2022 or 2023 is going to be when AR just blows the doors off, and we want to know how to do it. Because it's going to be as big as anything we've ever done. I think that the AR solutions that I've been testing for years that just don't have a platform for them, are going to be bigger than anything bigger than the phone. So it's definitely worth, keeping your eye on this space. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas asks, the official Olympic channel streams online using Theo Player, which seems to be a broadcast OTT focused CDN and player. Their specializations seem to be low latency or LL streams like LL HLS and LL Dash. Any experiences with this platform?
I have not used the platform. Yeah, so I don't know it. I have to admit, I'm not that big of a fan of low latency. I know that it's a thing that people are really, really excited about. And what's happening is they're letting you play the segments before they're complete. I mean, that's how you're getting that super low latency. You're playing out the frames before the segment's completed. But the issue you get into here is, higher instability, of it sending to you. If you have any issues with your internet, it's gonna be problematic. And I don't find, I watch most sports at high latency because there's ads. So I start my football games about 15 minutes late, and so then I can kind of work my way through it. And at least the first half, I don't have to watch any ads. So I think that, I don't know. I mean, I understand why people are doing it. They do it in live streaming because their comment engines are bad, and so they have to keep track of it in real time. But when they realize that they have a way to manage comments or questions, most importantly, the latency doesn't matter anymore. So next question.
Next one's coming in from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, and he says, weekly staff meetings are brought into remote workers via Zoom portal. Is there a way to get a Bluetooth mic into it and they can pass that around the table as they speak? For this, needs to be for them and trouble-free.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken. I can't hear you, Ken.
Cutting, switching. It's not Bluetooth. It's uses if I can switch my camera to it. Wrong one.
It's a cool effect, though.
That's
Get
the hang of this one, though. Oh, there it is. So even though I'm actually using this as a wireless transmitter to turn my in-ears into wireless, it actually can plug into an XLR mic, this part, and then transmit to this, which you can then plug into your whatever audio mixer or into your ATEM.
What is it? What mic inputs? What is it capable of with the portal? I guess is the question. What is the portal capable of? Guy, do you know what can it take in?
With the Bluetooth, all I've had success with is using it for headphones, so as an output, not as an input. So my suggestion, and this is just kind of old school, cheap way of doing it, is for $50 to $100, you can get a tour guide system, which is a mic and a little speaker. And a lot of teachers use these during the pandemic to get their voice closer to the mic in their laptop. And so it's just a way of quickly and cheaply doing what you want to do.
So there's no way to get external audio into a portal?
Nope.
Rupert?
Depending on how you're handling your active speaker and your pinning, you could bring a separate participant into the meeting, mute the video, and just bring the audio in through that. But that may mess up your active speaker workflow. You just have to watch out for that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting. I think that the not having a separate mic is probably related to how they're processing the audio. And they need that mic or the array of mics that it's using are probably very important to how it figures out noise cancellation and other focus issues. I know that they've spent a lot of time on that. Oh, next question.
Next one's coming in from Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. And he asks, any experience using thin clients? I am considering using a hardware thin client with Teradici in the cloud.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so thin clients can be interesting. I just want to clear up some of the terminology. Some people can sometimes refer to thin clients as just low-powered PCs or small form factor PCs, but a thin client in the true sense of the word is a not really a PC. It doesn't have an OS. It generally runs an embedded OS designed to connect to a server system. There can be some like economies of scale there in large environments that can work. But when you have a smaller environment, if you're using thin clients, you generally back yourself into a corner where if you need to drop down and do something locally, you can't because you're on a very skeleton OS. So it kind of puts you into a loop there. Also, the I/O can be limiting depending on what you need to pass through.
I am interested in experimenting with using a client like B-Link by Courtney. There we go. There it is. You didn't give us enough time to cut to it. Cut to there we go. B-Link by Courtney. So anyway, I think that could be a really useful one. I'd be curious how that works with Teradici or Parsec. It seems like in my head, it seems like it would work very well as a the pseudo, as Rupert put it, the pseudo thin client that would let you tie back into a more powerful computer. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Jeremy Bowen in Portland, and he says, "What's your favorite camera for under $1,000? It's not a webcam, and he wants to use it with Zoom."
Go ahead, Carl.
So you're looking for something that's not a webcam, but they can go into Zoom. So the only thing I would suggest, is going to be what Courtney actually has, which would be the M50 Mark II. The M50 Mark II has a USB webcam function, but I would definitely add it to an A10 Mini to get you to your $1,000 because the A10 Mini would be a far better webcam into the solution. But the camera itself does have USB webcam function just like the A10 Mini, but the A10 Mini gives you, it gives you limit key, it gives you a lot of other things. But so this combination would definitely be the number one thing I'd tell people around the $1,000 mark.
Go ahead, Rupert.
The best iPhone you can afford, Filmic Pro and HDMI out.
And you could also use HDMI out and then back into an ATEM possibly, or you could use Epic Cam or Camo, with the phone directly. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, Panasonic G100 because it's got the flip around screen, and so it comes with a kit lens. But later on, I would invest in better glass like the 12-40 Olympus or the 12-35 from Lumix. Those are 2.8 and will give you better low light capability because the lens that's included is a 12-32, and it's I don't remember what the f-stop is, but I want to say it's 3.5 to 5.6, so not a very good lens, but cool blogging package. That's what it's meant for. Otherwise, Sony A6400 with a Sigma 24 millimeter would also be a good recommended under $1,000 package.
Go ahead, TJ.
The question as written actually says favorite greater than $1,000 camera. So I would say something like a Blackmagic Ursa 12K.
But they don't have a webcam function. That's the thing. So I was trying to look for a webcam camera that actually has webcam out of the camera if they're looking for a single solution. And
it
that
says
was
non-webcam.
Non-webcam, but they want it directly in.
Yeah,
So-
I would definitely put a switcher. I would definitely put an ATEM switcher in as my way of getting in because it just gives you so much more capacity, to make that work. I think that might have been miswritten because it doesn't make any once you go over $1,000, I don't know any webcams that are there. So, but yeah, I think that I know a lot of folks that are happy with the Sonys. I think the big thing is that when you go to once you move to the Blackmagic cameras, you're now able to shade the camera and make adjustments and everything else. It's a buy one, cry once thing. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Rupert McRae, and he says, when mounting kit upside down or at height, when is a safety cable required or advisable, and when is it not?
Go ahead, Carl.
Always use the safety loop, even if it's like a 12-inch safety loop. Always use the safety loop. Always.
Pretty much anytime something's over top of everybody. Like it's just, if it's over top of if it's going to be over top of somebody's head, you want a safety cable on it. It's definitely worth the trouble. Just out there's some stars that even recently you're kind of surprised that have been, incapacitated for a long time because of a light, and they never get over it. Like if it falls it's heavy enough and it falls, but even small things we tie up pretty quickly. Next question.
Leo Mendel asks, my Mac has informed me Big Sur 11.5 is out, but the support doc is sparse on information. Any better info on compatibility?
I'm still on Catalina on my main machine, so I'm going to go to Big Sur eventually. Go ahead, Carl.
I believe this is just security updates. The big one's coming out in September.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
They've also put it out on the same day for Catalina as well. So they've rolled out a load all for every single one has come out today.
I think there's obviously Apple's been doing a lot of security updates. So I think that's probably, and it could be related to some of the text issues, the SMS vulnerabilities that they've been working on. I think that you're going to see a lot of updates in the next month as we get ready for the fall. Next question.
TJ Asher asks, for the opening ceremonies, there was a lot of projection on the arena floor. Has anyone on the panel worked with this type of projection? How are the various projectors across the arena catwalks coordinated to display a cohesive image?
Go ahead, Carl.
So it's called projection mapping. There's software that does it quite well. Most of the software I've ever seen is on Windows, though. It's quite good. So we actually do it here. In Adelaide, we did it part of the university, and that's how I got involved with it. But yeah, they projection map onto 3D buildings, but that was a 2D surface, so it made it a little bit easier. And it's quite easy. You can actually double up projectors on top of each other to make it brighter, which I don't think they need to do, though, because they can control the lighting in the stadium.
And the projection mapping has been around for a long time. We use it in matte paintings a lot. And in fact, probably the earliest use of it was called Make Sticky. And what it did is it basically took a camera, and from that camera's perspective, it just projects out an image over a series of 3D models. And this happened really early on, and that allows us to visualize it. And as long as that camera stays right where it is, it's going to, from the angle that it needs to be at, it's going to look like has much more detail and everything else. And so that's but projection mapping has become very complex. There's a lot of software. Ventus, I think, is one of the pieces of software that's used for that. But there's a lot, and I believe that Resolume can do some of those things, because it's some of it's projection and some of it is just how you're building it, because you're projecting it out and you have to be able to see it, and then you build geometry for it. So in the ones that I've worked on tangentially, I haven't worked on the projection itself. We definitely scan the spaces, because you need to have exactly the 3D space that you're going to use, and you'll build some of the rough stuff in CAD, but then you have to tweak everything once it's built, because the as-built is different than, it's never the same. So once you get on site, there's lots of little bits and pieces to make it work. Go ahead, Sky.
Now that it was mentioned, I realized they've turned that entire stadium into a big giant theatrical stage, or even a disco, because we didn't have the halogen lights that took a while to warm up and all of that. Everything was either on or off, and it was very well timed, even to the script of, and now we cut to the wide shot because we're going to see the pyrotechnique, or the pyro, blow up on the top of the stadium. So the scripting was just fantastic. They knew it was a show for the consumer out here. And the thing that I also realized, they're bringing in the families of the specific, I want to say talent, not the actors, sorry, the competitors. They're in Arkansas, they're in California, and so they're cutting to the moms and having the interaction through the studio.
Next question.
This one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, it seems like many of the big name broadcast graphics products like VizRT are Windows only despite the Mac's domination of our industry. Why could that be, and could Apple Silicon change that?
I think historically it's been easier to write to the metal on Windows. They need oftentimes heavy GPUs that aren't available on the Mac. Courtney?
Yeah, and you got to realize it's a closed garden, and Apple controls all the hardware, other than external things that are hooked up through Thunderbolt. But so you have a lot more variety in the Windows platform within a single box, which makes it easier to control.
On some of our high performance graphic systems, we have 4 industrial grade NVIDIA cards in them. So we can't do that on a Mac. Go ahead, Rupert.
And just at this moment in time, with the way things are in the cloud, Windows is just more accessible in the cloud right now. So
go ahead, Leo.
I'd actually say it's going to make it worse when they move over to the Mac hardware, because it's going to be, you're really making it into a completely different environment to write to. And if you want to write something that's specialist, if you want to write something that's open to lots and lots and thousands and millions of people, you have the ability to write it to a lot to port. If you're writing to something where you want to make sure it works, you want to make sure that you can deliver it, and you have your support infrastructure is minimal. So you don't want to have to sit there and have to write it to many different environments. And particularly with the factors you just mentioned about the NVIDIA chipset is now no longer there on the Mac environment. That's just taken that whole area away. So
for this vertical, for this small vertical, I mean, the other thing is it's a tiny market. like real-time graphics at $100,000 a pop is a minuscule market. It's just not. It's not. You know, so they're going to have a specialized area that they're going to go after, and that specialized area that they're going after is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's not something that I even think Apple would pay much attention to. Next question.
Yeah, can you go ahead and grab these, Alex? I got to jump.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Douglas Carmichael asks, for big broadcast work, does Grass Valley still lead the switching market, or have Sony and Ross ruled the roost? I think it depends on where you're at. So where we see this is in virtual events. Not for virtual, in-person events in a big space. We see Grass Valley a lot. In trucks, we see Sony. And then in corporate, we tend to see Ross. In sports, we see Ross as well. So those are it just depends on where we're at. But that's how it shows up. I don't have a scientific view of that. I have where I see the different switchers is in different locations is kind of breaks across those. I don't see Ross as often outside of corporate. It's kind of a more that's where I see it the most. And then in trucks, you always see a Sony. I've seen a Grass once, and it was kind of like, wow, there's Grass in the truck. So usually those are Sony's, the big Sony switchers. And then again, when we do big events at like Moscone or something, we see Grass a lot. And it just depends on rental and process and what verticals that people work in. Next question is also from Douglas Carmichael. He says, Sony offers a virtual shot box on their XVS series switchers. What is a shot box and how is it used? I don't think I'm a very good person to answer that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if they're referring to, it's been a long time since I've worked in a television studio, but the shot box used to be something that was on the camera that would have pre-composed zoom levels and focus distance. So you'd hit a button for the one shot, hit another button for the wide shot, or hit another button for the two shot. So maybe what they're talking about is a virtual one is a DVE effect that basically does scaling to a certain spot and a certain size and a certain position that you can preset beforehand, like 4 or 5 presets.
Next question is from Tony Mobley. And he said, for the church I am supporting on Zoom, what is the best way to help my 92-year-old pastor just get her camera portal or iPad or something? Oh, so what would help her? Go ahead, Leo.
So this morning I went down to a Scout Hut because they had a meeting and they wanted to just do something really simple. They hadn't got anything in the room. I put down a Facebook portal and they did the thing and they wandered around talking to this thing. It sounded unbelievable for what it is, for the $100 that it is. I thought it's great.
Carl?
So the iPad Pro with center stage. So it is without doubt the best, and it's a large screen, so you can either have a one person looking, or she can look at a group of people on there. It's large enough. It'll follow her around if she needs to move. If not, it'll perfectly frame her generally. So I think that's probably the best solution.
Yeah, I think so too. Easiest to use. I really wish the iPad would put a camera on the side instead of on the top, because when you want to go into landscape and you can't, now the camera's off to one side. It's just it's a weird thing. Next question is from Brad Dre from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. What are your thoughts on Apple's iCloud photo library? I like the idea of having a backup in the cloud along with backups into external drives, but I am a little concerned about deleting photos on all devices. Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, if you go with the traditional wisdom, that would actually give you 3 copies. If you got it in the cloud, got it on an external drive, and got it on your local device, that's kind of the triple redundancy that you really want for data backup.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so as a photographer, I'll tell you a little bit about my workflow, and I actually use iCloud Photos professionally. So what it is, it's my JPEG backup of delivered photos. So the stuff I've edited, chosen for delivery, that's actually where the JPEG backup goes, and that's right, it's off-site. So if my place burns down, at least I've got the JPEGs that I've delivered. On-site, I have a Drobo, which technically backs up itself, but I choose that as one, and that actually is archive storage. I never take any photos off of there. It just goes there and it's one direction, because you don't want to play with Drobos, they fail if you keep on using their servers. And then I just have a simple MyBook, like a little Western Digital MyBook, and that's the other backup on a separate device, separate power. So if I get a surge, it's not going to be a big problem. And that's that. So those are both RAWs. The Drobo has both JPEGs and RAWs, but the JPEGs in the cloud has two functions. I can also search for photos, because Apple's artificial intelligence with iCloud Photo has gotten better since they first launched it, and it is quite amazing now. I can just put in the word cat, I can put in the word funny hat. You can actually put in the word funny hat and it'll come up with funny hats, not just hats.
Go ahead, TJ.
Hey, Carl, I'm wondering, does the delete function in the iCloud photo library work similar to like on an iPhone, where if I delete the image there, will it ripple delete across all of my devices?
It gives you two. Delete from this device, delete from my library. And then it gives you a little spill underneath it. Delete from this device, we'll just delete it off that device, and that saves room on your device. So therefore, it'll show with a little cloud icon the next time you want to go to it. The thumbnail may stay around, but the photo's gone. Delete from my iCloud photo library, and it will warn you when you do this, delete. But of course, there's always 30 days. You can go to your deleted albums and delete, so you have to actually delete 5 times before it goes for you, because you do have 30 days. So you can go into your deleted stuff and what do they call it? They put back essentially, but
I have to admit
restore.
I can't remember the last time I deleted a photo from my iPhoto library. Like which is why it's so big. Even the things where my kids take over, when they were little kids, they would grab onto my phone or grab onto my iPad and take a whole slew of goofy photos. I look back and I was glad I didn't delete them, because they're funny. Like there are these kind of funny moments, and so I haven't deleted anything for a long time. Next question is from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. He says, is there a way to check Zoom audio video sync without signing into a live Zoom meeting? The individual audio and video tests results are fine. Thanks. Rupert?
So to test the Zoom performance, you really do want to test it through Zoom. You don't have to join a live meeting to do that. There is a Zoom test meeting feature. If you go to the very bottom of the Zoom website, on any of the pages, you'll see test meeting. That'll launch a synthetic meeting, and you can do some testing through that. For a more realistic kind of test, you could set up a second Zoom login and then just create a meeting with yourself to the other login and then test it that way. It could be resolution dependent though. If the meeting you're ultimately going to join is high resolution, if your machine gets bogged down by that, you may find the sync changes slightly. So you could always log into meeting meters into your test meeting to bump that up to see what the performance is at high resolution.
Good, Carl.
Yeah, pretty much what Rupert said. You can either have 2 accounts, it's the dummy account or test account, and just use that to test in, and you can record the output, and then you can find, you use a DAW or something and check exactly how your sync is.
Go ahead, Leo.
I do a lot of green room tests for people, and the thing that they find amazing is when you record them and send them back to them, because they never ever hear what they sound like.
So
and
important.
It's quite amazing how many people will join to say, my Zoom sounds great and I look great, and you'll go, I'm going to record this and show you what you sound like, and you'll see it, and they don't. And they just assume they said, well, nobody's ever complained. I said, yes, because nobody does. Nobody tells you that you're on wireless. Nobody bothers to warn you that the camera looks poor or that your sound audio levels, because people don't. They just accept it's a fault that they have to live with. And when you send them back and you show them the difference and they can hear it and they understand, then they realize that there is a big difference. But the only solution to that is recording.
Right. Go ahead, Chad.
Vic came on in the past week, and the problem that he was trying to solve isn't a consistent out of sync issue. It was intermittent. It'd be way out of sync for a while, and then it'd sync up. And a short-term Zoom test isn't going to do it. I think we need to look more into his signal change and see what else might be happening. I know he's got a cheaper mic out of Walmart. Maybe addressing that or taking a look at his laptop specs would be a good idea. But Vic, reach out on Discord. There are a lot of people who are great at solving this kind of problem.
Sounds good.
And how the interview go.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, with the graphical advantages on Windows, do you think we'll ever see Microsoft pay attention to the audio subsystem, i.e. a proper supported ASIO infrastructure or audio hijack-like capability? I think it's all there. I think it's not so much Microsoft. I think it's just a matter of a developer. I think the tools are there. They're a little harder to get to than on the Mac. The video and audio subsystems that are available via libraries on the Mac are a little bit more. They're more structured, so you can't do as many things. But what you can do is much easier. You say, "Oh, I just want this," and you get it. Go ahead, Leo.
So you can get all this because they support their own Windows drivers rather than the ISO ones, but you can get it. But one of the things that's always bugged me is related to this is that Microsoft forever have never come out with a reasonable package to deal with pictures. Whether it was Paint or Draw or all these, they're horrible. They've never ever had something that's just basic. So it's like, for some reason at one level, this company doesn't want to deal with this thing, doesn't like or doesn't see this as an important aspect. And you can argue exactly the same happens on Apple. There are certain niches or certain areas that you would think that they would solve that problem, and they just don't. And I don't know why.
Well, they solve the problem internally. So Microsoft has some incredible research groups that are doing all kinds of stuff. They just don't come out with any products. Like it kind of moves around. There's been some incredible photo analysis that they've been doing for decades, and they just don't actually. It doesn't synthesize into a product. Go ahead, Courtney.
You got to remember, Microsoft's main income is off of selling software, and Apple's main income is off of selling hardware. So Apple tends to keep its software that it does right and its hardware more vertically oriented, whereas Microsoft, you can run on any hardware. There's thousands of different combinations of hardware, and to write a single hardware application layer that can deal with all the different types of software on all the different types of hardware, it's just astronomically too impossible. Whereas you can do it easily in the very limited hardware Apple universe.
Yep, absolutely. Sky.
Yeah, there's also been a huge cultural shift too, from the enterprise focus that was where Microsoft made its billions and who they had to support. Also, they will also often go out and buy other companies that are doing these artistic things, and they're very aggressive with the Surface concept and in the artist world. So it's not that they're not thinking about it. It's just, you're right, it's not where their big money is.
And Rupert?
I also think they want to lean more and more on the Windows App Store, and just directing users to that. It just gives them a different revenue model.
Absolutely. Next question is from Michael Fraley. He says, has anyone had any experience with the new patent FPX 6000 AV over IP using Dante? Not yet, but I think we're going to probably talk about that soon. So we're gonna get those guys on. We've already been trading emails. So we'll talk more about that. So I think it's one of the first Dante, the AV over Dante products that's out. So we're gonna have them on soon. So stay tuned for that. Brad Day from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania says, I just received my M1 iMac and I'm finally upgrading from iMovie to Final Cut. Any advice for learning Final Cut? Go ahead, Carl.
If you can afford it, Ripple Training. If not, there are some good. Ripple Training, that'd be my first place to start with, because those guys are pretty good, especially with their earlier stuff, so you can do the beginner courses. And then if you want to go deep, those guys go real deep. There are some YouTubes, but Apple's Own. So look at Apple's Own help. Go to help. Apple actually has some really good. There's actually a lot of people that you may know who were podcasters in the past who actually now create the stuff that is in the help tab of Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, I would highly recommend. I would highly recommend the Ripple Training. It just makes it a lot. It'll save you a lot of time, and suddenly you'll just know a bunch of things that you need to know. There are, to Carl's point, lots of YouTube stuff. There's lots of other places to go. There's lynda.com stuff or LinkedIn Learning or whatever. There's all kinds of stuff out there. The Ripple Training will get you the farthest, the fastest. You'll spend a weekend working through it, and you'll know most of the things you need to know about it. Go ahead, TJ.
I agree. Ripple Training is very dense and compact. If you have a public library card, a lot of public libraries have teamed up with was Lynda.com, it's LinkedIn Learning now, and you can actually get free all the tutorials available on LinkedIn Learning through some public libraries.
Yeah, yeah, and the main thing is that I would bite the bullet. One of the things that that I've learned about apps is it's better to just sit down for a weekend and just run, just work through that tutorial than it is to do like an hour here, an hour there, because you can't remember all the bits and pieces. And just go through it. Give yourself a Saturday or 2 Saturdays or a Saturday and a Sunday and just push through the whole thing, and then start doing what you're doing, and it'll all start to come back, and you'll go back to it, but it's just easier to get through all of it. Go ahead, DJ.
And one other thing, try to have a specific goal in mind, or a project that you're trying to accomplish, because just learning to learn stuff, you'll sort of pick up here and there. But if you're trying to get something actually accomplished, you will start to pick up on things that as you're watching a tutorial, you'll be like, oh, I can apply that to here, or I can apply that to here. When I was creating some lower thirds for Victor, I was like, okay. And then as I'm going through the training, I'm like, oh, I can do this and use that over here, and I can do this and use that over here to make the lower thirds different and better.
The other thing I'll recommend is working for other people. Like volunteer your time. When you're trying to learn something, volunteer your time to your local, to a local charity, to a church, to a whatever makes sense to you. You want external clients, and the reason for that is they're going to ask you to do things that I have to figure out this thing over the weekend of how to do super sources that are animating. So imagine a Mix Effect Pro that are all animating to each other in an ATEM with mortises around them and lower thirds inside of it. Now, when they said it, I was like, no one ever does that, but we figured it out. I figured it out in my head. Now I have to make sure it works. But the point is that it is now I have a whole new set of things that I know how to do based on having to think through that process. And clients will ask you things. You'll skip over things like that. You won't think of them, or you'll think that they're not possible or not useful. And so the client will force you to, finding external clients will force you to learn things that you won't learn otherwise. Next question is from Tim Holm. He said, I have about a 30-foot run of cables going from our sound booth to a couple of camera platforms. They are around 6 to 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches across, taped down, but look terrible. What can I use to cover these to make them look better? People do walk across the area. And go ahead, Carl.
So you can get the yellow jackets, the cable runners. You can get really thin ones. You can get ones that are grey as well. They don't have to be yellow. You can get carpet mats. So these are carpet mats that can go over cables. And you can actually get semicircle conduits, but that's not so good. That's more for going along a corner or skirting, not so much for people walking over.
Go ahead, Tim.
Do those carpet mats move around? Like if you put them on there, do they kind of shift around? The carpet's pretty thin.
Is it going across carpet?
It is going across carpet.
So another thing you can do is there's rolls of basically covering that has Velcro down both sides. And so you can actually, it'll just stick to the carpet. It won't damage the carpet the way tape will. And it will, it looks much nicer, and you get all different colors. So you can get green and brown and red and whatever you want. And you can get them on Amazon. We get them like 100-foot rolls of this, and you can get them different widths depending on what you're doing. What's nice about them is so they're in our cases all the time when we go out. Anytime we see a carpet, that's what's going down, because also when you want to add a new cable, you just pull up one side, you run the cable down and put it back and stick it back down. And it's super useful to close that stuff up if you have a carpet. If you don't, then we go back to, those, kind of strips. Again, we usually get rolls of them that'll roll out, and we'll cut them to length. Go ahead, Rupert.
If it's a long-term, like semi-permanent installation, and you have high traffic areas and you're using any method that actually comes in contact with the cable, you'll find that will actually wear on the cables over time. So just consider the longevity of the installation.
The bigger solution that may not be viable for what you're doing, but just so you know that the solution that we do when we build studios is we raise the whole floor by 1.5 inches. There's basically interlocking floors that will basically bring the whole floor up 1.5 inches or 2 inches or 3 inches. You can run tanks over them. I mean, literally, that's what they were designed for. And then what happens is that now you have cable runs anywhere at all, and all you have to do is cut a little hole somewhere where you want it to come out, and it just gets rid of all the cables. And so when I build when I build studios now, I build them into the studio every single time. You want to, I want to raise that floor up just a little bit so that I don't have that huge cable mess that's there. So it's another thing to think about. It may not be in a church. It may not be applicable. You may have a lot of other things.
This is a room the size of a gym with concrete floor, so might be beyond the budget.
Yeah. No, but we've done them in rooms the size of a gym. So it could be expensive to do it. I can't remember what it is, but it isn't cheap to do. That would probably cost a couple $1,000s to do that, but it definitely makes everything easier later. And you can put almost any amount of weight on things on these, depending on what you get, especially if you don't go up very high. And then I will say that it is expensive and it's life-changing. Like when you have suddenly this raised floor. I was at a convention, working at a convention, and I had never seen it before. And once we started using it, we were just like, oh, I don't know how I lived without this. All right. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. And he said, can most audiologists make impressions for custom in-ear monitors, or do you have to use the audiologist specified approved by the IEM maker? I will argue that almost every audiologist, that's like kind of carpenter drive nails, they have to be able to do that, because what they're doing is building those in-ears for people's hearing aids. So it would be extremely unlikely that they could not build the imprint that you needed for it. That said, the quality of it could vary, and I would generally go to the ones that were recommended by the IEM manufacturer. Most of them know, in any major city, will know the ones that they recommend, that they've worked with in the past, and that they know that they get what they need out of it. Sometimes people can be a little incomplete with how far they create the impression, because hearing aids have a different need than IEMs. So they may have a reason that they're pointing towards certain people. It tends to be an investment. Now you can also do it yourself. I know that Audio Implements, as an example, will just mail you a box to do the imprint, and then you'll get it back, because the resolution of what they build isn't very high. It works. It's not required. Next question is from Tim Holm, and he said, from San Lorenzo, how do you remove the sticky residue left behind by cheap gaff tape? Asking for a friend. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, so it depends on the surface. If the surface is not like polished wood that's delicate, then I never thought I'd suggest this on office hours. But a carpet cleaner, the urine remover, so anyone who owns pets who knows this carpet cleaner will know that this works the best. So but most foaming carpet cleaner will work. So there's something about carpet cleaners, not on polished wood though. So polished wood, that's a little bit different. I would probably use, polished wood's really tricky because you're going to rip up the lacquer no matter what. Yeah. But on anything that's not polished wood, I would use a foaming carpet cleaner. This is probably one of the best ones though.
Good, Courtney.
Depends on what it's on, but Goof Off or Goo Gone are designed to remove that adhesive. But that you do have to use them judiciously. And the other best way is to take a piece of the gaffer tape with the really sticky, really good sticky gaffer tape, and wrap it around sticky side out onto your hand, and then just pad the sticky area with that. It will attach itself to the adhesive there and pull it up off of whatever surface it's on.
We also do that reverse gaff as it's like the human vacuum cleaner. Like if you just need to clean something on a stage, we wrap it up and just tap. I once did it
for dandruff too,
I once did it to a whole room. And just in case you're wondering, it took like an hour and a half for me to do the whole room, because the carpet, for some reason, it wasn't coming up. We needed to wash it or something. We didn't have something, and we had to shoot something there. And it was like I tried to do it with a cheap vacuum. Finally, I just got on my hands and knees and just patted it. Went through a whole roll of gaff tape to do it. Go ahead, Leo.
I've used this multi-solve. It's absolutely brilliant. I use it for anything that's related to that. You spray it on, and it removes the stickiness of even like someone's going to put old packing tape on something and left it on there for 3 weeks or 3 months, and it just gets rid of it instantly.
Go ahead, TJ.
+1 for Goo Gone, and also orange oil. Depending, again, test your surface in an obscure area carefully before you start applying this stuff. Orange oil would probably work reasonably well on the wood because it's not going to eat through. And also you could use like acetone. that would be like my last resort.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, it's actually on the cables themselves, so it's kind of wrapped itself around on the cables.
The Gugon works great, like in that environment, and what Carl had. I mean, all of these work. If you're not worried about, we're worried about people's surfaces, but as soon as you talk about the cables, there's all kinds of things that work. But we routinely use Gugon for any kind of stickiness left on the cables, and then we leave them out. We leave them out to dry. So we use Gugon, and then we use water, and then we leave them out in the sun, which will relax them, and then we coil them up. Go ahead, Rupert.
I generally get a cloth and soak it in that stuff, and then just run the cables, feeding through my hands like that.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Leo.
And look at what gaffer tape it was, and never ever buy it ever again. That is the biggest thing, and also teach people not to rip up the cable, leaving the gaffer tape attached. And my daughter did that on one event we were at. She spent an hour and a half pulling off gaffer tape, bit by bit.
The one of the things that I'm super careful about is the we could do a whole second hour on gaffing. Like there could be a whole second hour on how to gaff. We really should. Because it was one of those things, like if you're going to go out with us, I used to sit down and work with everybody on teaching them how I wanted them to gaff. And because it was like a specific way, but one of the big things is when you gaff along space, I never break it up. Like I always have one long piece of gaff. Now what I do is I pull it taut, and I tag it, along it. So I pull it straight. So I have a nice straight line. And then I pull it along, and I just keep on setting the gaffer roll on the thing, and then pushing it down. And so I get this long string, but that means that I can pull it up as one long piece. Like that. The reason I do it that way is so that if you put it in sections, takes a lot longer to pull it up. So anyway, yeah, go ahead, Leo.
Is that the second lesson after cable wrapping?
Oh yeah. I have my kids, like they came into the warehouse. First thing I did is like, okay, so here's how to wrap the cables. And so my kids were like 10 years old, like wrapping cables. We learned it. What was funny was as I learned it as a kid, because that's how we coiled rope for roping. Anyway, go ahead, Craig.
I was just gonna say, like your carpet rolls, wasn't there a company that was doing gaff tape that actually just had the adhesive on the outside and the center was non-sticky, just for cable runs?
There is some.
Yeah, you can get it from B&H. Yeah, you can get it from B&H.
Yeah,
they have a 2-inch version and a 1-inch version. Yeah.
They also have a thing that will gaff where you just run it along the cable, and it just does. It's looks like a sweeper, and you just push it along. And we bought one and never used it. Like we're so used to doing it manually, it just sat there forever, and it worked great. Like we took it out, we used it in the warehouse. We were like, this is amazing. And then it just never got packed because it was one more thing to put in the truck, and it just never got used. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, what would you think of a second hour on theatrical audio? I think if we got the right person, it would be very interesting. Yeah, I think it'd be great. Put it in the list, and we'll see if we can't find somebody. Go ahead, Craig.
Sorry, I just had to cough. He's also got another question coming up about that. I've done that for quite a long time, and his question later, if I can address it, just because it's the same sort of thing about DCA fader mixing. That's mostly just about.
He said his other one is that he has here is I've noticed that's the theatrical audio mixers rarely leave the DCA faders on the console as they mix. Is it a basic process to set relative levels on the channel faders and then use DCAs to bring the sections in and out line by line? Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah. So that's what I was referring to, just because it sort of tied in.
Yep.
The main thing from the shows that I've mixed, and I've done a number of Broadway style musicals here.
Mm-hmm.
It's because then you've got, we're dealing with sometimes upwards to close to 200 inputs on really big shows. You can focus your centered on one part of the console. You use the console automation, whether it's the digital ones or back in the days of analog consoles like CADAC, where every channel could be programmed to the VCA DCAs on a scene by scene basis. And then you just have your workspace that automatically reconfigures as you go through the show. And it's just a way to be more efficient at it than trying to reach across, upwards of 20 feet of console in the old analog days.
Next question is from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. He said, in reference to the idea of triple redundancy data backup, any panel recommendations for cloud-based backup storage? Go ahead, TJ.
I've been using Backblaze for more than 10 years, and I've got 20 some odd terabytes of data stored in their cloud.
Yep, Rupert.
So when it comes to these services, you do want to make, if you're relying on it for backup, you do want to make sure that you've got the equivalent settings that we talked about earlier, which is to not delete things from your cloud backup when you delete them locally. Otherwise, there's no backup at all. I like to stick to the paid services because then I can expect some service in return. And if I'm not giving them money, I'm probably giving them something else. I'm a Office 365. I'm in the Office 365 ecosystem, so I like OneDrive.
Go ahead, Carl.
Depends on how much data you're talking. iCloud is pretty good, but it's only 2 terabyte max. That's it. That's the limit. Google Drive, but Backblaze, if you're doing large amounts of data, then Backblaze will probably be one of the more economical ones.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've been using Carbonite for years, and it works pretty well. It does work in the background, and once you designate certain files or folders that you want to keep constantly in sync with the cloud, it'll do that in the background. But you do have to be careful of it because it tends to try and back up at the most inopportune moment when you're in the middle of some live show or something. So you have to limit it to certain hours so it doesn't eat up all your bandwidth, in doing its backups.
Go, TJ.
One thing you want to do is practice restoring from your backup. A lot of people do not ever do that. And that one proves your backup is actually backing up what you're expecting. But when stuff hits the fan, you're going to be able to get your data back in a reasonable manner if you know what you need to do.
Yep. Great suggestions. Next question is from John Barker. For Office Hours 2.0, I'm sure many folks here would love to do a show on the OH network. Will this be possible, and what groundwork would be done now to ramp up for this? Yes, absolutely. That's going to be possible. I mean, the goal is to get to a point where we have viable shows running 24/7, and then eventually multiple channels of viable shows running 24/7. I think that being in the panel is a good place to start, just as an introduction. And then, contact me about what you want to do. And I think that we can take a look at it. Cause I think that we have to figure out whether we want to do after hours or whether we just want to extend office hours. So for instance, it might be something that I sign off on at 9 o'clock, and instead of just going straight into an after hours mode, we would just add another show. Or we do it sometime. I think the first thing that I would do is experiment with it in after hours. Like you could say, hey, I'm going to do a Q&A, or I'm going to do something at 1 o'clock. I'm trying to protect, just as a note, after I just said 9 o'clock, I'm trying to protect 9 to 1 right now because I'm working on some stuff that we might put into there. But in the afternoons or in the mornings, telling people maybe 9 to noon, but at like noon, I'm going to do a show every Monday or every Tuesday or every day. Doesn't matter to me. But I'm going to do a show, like, especially if you want to do a show like that, I think it'd be great. Whatever you want to talk about there. But I think that doing it in after hours and then seeing and letting people know, and I'm happy to put it into the broadcasts out that we send out, the emails, like, hey, John's is going to talk about ATEMs or whatever you want to talk about there. And, those kinds of things we could let people know that it's happening, so that people, and again, in the Discord, what I'd like to do is add an after hours. I don't know if we've added that yet, Chad. You might have already gotten ahead of it, but a kind of after hour alerts kind of thing where we can just, I think what we want to do is not have it be an after hours discussion, but after hour alerts that people can subscribe to that just tells them that something's happening. So they get an update real quick. And we might even want to limit, Chad, to like who has access to, who can post to that channel. Just because we'll figure out the right number of people, but that way it doesn't become a discussion. It becomes people who have access to it know that it's there. And then people can know that you're going to come on. And this is an open invitation to folks. I mean, that's the goal. I don't want to make after hours all shows, but I want to experiment, use it as an R&D place. And then what we'll do is we'll graduate shows that people are coming to in after hours. And after we've figured it all out, graduate it to part of the program, but I think that I would love to do that. And then definitely on Saturdays, we're going to fill Saturday up. Like I'm just that's the one day that most likely we'll get really full. So I expect it to get full all the way from, it'll open up at 5 a.m. and there'll be something to do until 6 or 7 in the evening. We'll pack it tight by the end of September or October. Next question is from Angelo Jack from Brooklyn, New York. He said, I know we should not use HDMI cables longer than 6 feet, but can the panel suggest good quality long HDMI 50 feet for emergencies? Go ahead, Carl.
So the ones I would usually suggest are the A10s, ATENs. They're good price, but good quality. So here I've got a 1.4, which will do you 1080, and a 2.0, which will do you 4K. And these are a good price.
Good, Courtney.
Length.
I've had good luck with the mono price, but these are unidirectional cables because they're active cables. This is a 50-footer. It's like $64. Remember, you got to plug. It says TV on one end there, and so that is your output. You got to remember to run them the right way. But I've had pretty good luck with that. They're braided, they're active. So, and once you get over 50 feet, and you're running 4K, I would only go with an active cable.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So this morning we, in our shopping trip with Hasmuth, he was looking at solving this problem anyway, and he bought SDI converters, HDMI to SDI converters. I know the question is there, but when you start looking at it and you start weighing it up and you want it to work, you start worrying when you put that sort of length on HDMI and you suddenly find it fails right when you don't want it to fail. And then it wasn't a good idea.
When you look at those, if you're getting a non-active, I have had non-active cables that are 70 feet long of HDMI, mostly for, interestingly enough, for underwater, because we were using little camcorders that we put into little underwater rigs, and in those cases, it was just really, really thick, thick cables, because that what gauge you're using also makes a big difference in terms of resistance. Next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. He said, in Zoom, is there any difference between streaming to YouTube using the YouTube streaming option and streaming to a custom RTMP service and entering the YouTube information manually? I've had a lot of failures using the RTMP, which is why I don't do it, where it just hangs. So that's why I go straight. Go ahead, Leo.
So one of the biggest advantages in doing the other way via the custom is that you don't have to give people access to the YouTube account or worry about that side of it to the same level, because the way now they've changed the security is that when you hit the go live, it takes you to the YouTube page. If you're not logged in, you basically find at the last minute you can't actually stream, when if you're going to the RTMP, you don't have that problem. Also, with going to the custom RTMP, you can do you can send it to multiple destinations, so it's multiple YouTube channels. That's what I use Restream all the time. So I go to multiple destinations. In terms of quality, it's exactly the same. I haven't seen any difference in terms of the quality. It's the same output coming from the same whatever it's coming from. But there is one small thing which it says, but I've never seen it work in both directions, is you should be able to, if people hit a room and it's a 300 limit, they hit the room, they should get redirected. It says it doesn't work for the custom, but it used to work for the custom. I don't know why.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, I've been seriously looking at the Contour XO headphones. Would this look past the OH 2.0 standards? Or would it be worth getting a custom impressions? It'll definitely work. It's a lot of money for an in-ear for what we need. If you want to get one, I think it's great. It'll look fine. Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, you don't need to go super expensive. The $20 skull candies will work just fine. If you have glasses, especially, you can route these kind of up around your ear. And if you're sitting like Leo or Tim, or even Ken, where you've got one side turned away from the camera just a little bit more, you route and look at any newscaster. They're always got one ear away from the camera, and that has their IFB in it every time. And so, yeah, you can just do a cheapy little thing and get away with that.
Yep. Leo, real quick.
Really quick. I've been using these. I haven't got them connected to my Mac at the moment, but the ones that sit in front, the bone connection ones, and I know that Jeffrey uses them well. The quality, when I swap back into my FBs, these are better.
Oh, interesting. Last question for the first hour. If you wanted to build a custom control panel for a specific show, like Andy did for Sax Jam, would Isadora be the best tool, or is there other products that would be better? We're weighing that right now. We're bouncing back and forth between Isadora and Universe. So those are the two that we're looking at. They have different feature sets and different capabilities. And so, I think that we may end up with the web version, or the cloud version may end up being Universe, but we're going back and forth, and we're going to show you guys what we're doing. Our goal is not to have a secret thing that we're doing, figuring out how to do. So as we figure all of this stuff out, we're going to do second hours about what we're putting together and showing you. And even some of them, when we're testing them, it'll be like what we saw in June, where we just open it up and go, okay, this is how we're doing it. And we'll get suggestions from all of you. Like there might be a better way to do some of the things that we're doing there. So, so it'll be a pretty open format. My goal is not that we know how to do it. My goal is that we all know how to do it. Not that I know how to do it or Andy knows how to do it. Go ahead, TJ.
Yeah, Andy had built the initial layout for Victor's Sax Jam, and then based on what Victor and I, as we were exploring, and as I was learning Isadora and picking Tlaloc's brain on Isadora, it's like, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And so I have taken Andy's original thing and greatly expanded what I can do, and I have a lot more control over Victor's ATEM than the original setup that Andy did.
And that's
so
the power.
What Andy did was a great thing. Nobody has any clue. I hit this button, it cuts. I hit this button, it cuts. But me wanting to have more control, after the first couple of shows, like, no, I now know I need to be able to do more, and that's what got me down that road.
And I think that's what's going to keep happening with what we're doing with office hours, is that we're going to keep on improving the interface and wiring it up. And there may even be multiple interfaces. This is a simple interface for someone who is going to get to cut the show today that just survive. Thank you. And then there's other ones that are more complex for the folks that we're doing an advanced, something where there's an advanced panel. I could see us eventually even pulling that back using Companion into hardware, so that, that you could have things that are, for people who want to go that far. And again, I see it as a platform as we figure it out. What we're doing is not figuring out just how to do office hours. We're figuring out how to build a conversational broadcast, and so my hope is that once we figure this out, we can use that engine for other things. When we talk about gardening or cars or, sports or whatever it is, but they want to be a conversational broadcast. We either put it into the cloud, or in some cases we have the hardware available to folks, within office hours to do their own shows, kind of thing. Because it is, in the hardware version of this, it's $30,000-$40,000 of hardware. So it's in the software version of it, you could theoretically do most of what we're doing in hardware in the cloud. And so I think that we're going to look at both of those solutions, as we kind of move forward. So we are now, we got 18 minutes until the top of the hour. What we're going to do is go ahead and invite our educators in to the thing. So go ahead and raise your hand if we're one of the educators here. And I can't bring them in, but I'm gonna take a little break. If we can bring the educators in and do the mic checks, then I'll be back right at the top of the hour. Thanks.
I'll handle the mic checks for them as they come in.
Perfect.
Okay. As they come in, Sky, you've got to send Laura tickets. She's already requested for in-person tickets.
And Mark, are you wanting to be pushed back? And same with Carl and John, all want to be promoted to producer?
Me too, me too.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, if you can push me as well.
Off to watch the rugby.
Thanks, guys. The rugby exodus.
Additionally, Tony has been the switcher, but Ken, are you've got your hand up. I assume you're not the host, because if you push yourself out, that could be a bad thing. Just say.
No, I've just made you co-host to
Okay.
Ken, are you wanting to be pushed back to producer?
Yes.
Then you'll need to reassign maybe Sky as the host.
As the host.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or have it actually, Chris. Let's hand it to Chris.
Chris Clark is going to cut the. Okay. Yep. hand.
Oh, not the cut. Okay. Sky will, I'll hand it to Sky for now. I'll take it. I will shoulder that responsibility. Have we killed the YouTube?
We have not.
I shall do that as well, of course.
Copy that.
I shall stop.
You
Oh
can't.
no, I'll
you
pass
hand-
it to you now.
You hand
so
it to me.
you need
Okay.
do that.
Sky
Yeah.
is saying have a great rest of your day, and we're stopping the live stream.